Welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Chicago Audible. It's Thursday, July 9th, and we're getting closer to the start of training camp, which is now less than 3 weeks away. I'm your host, Will DeWitt, and I want to thank you for tuning in, as we do have a great show in store for you. And of course, right here with me is my co-host, Nicholas Moriano. Nick, it's great to see you. I'm excited for tonight. We're actually doing a double recording night, as we need to really crank out these countdown to camp episodes. But how are things going for you this week?
They've been going well, Will. I always like doing these double episodes. It means that we're cramming in a lot of information, but it's going to be really insightful for all of our listeners. But I have been going back to Bears Fit, Will, and it's just felt great to be back in the gym. I know we were talking about this maybe a couple weeks ago, how I think you're still a little hesitant with, everything going on. But for me, it's just been great to actually get out of the house and start lifting again.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for you, you have a pretty big gym, so you can properly distance with other people. Here in my town, here in Bloomington, really small gym. Didn't really see people really following procedures, which really gets me hesitant. So unfortunately, I'm paying for a gym membership that I'm just not ready to use just yet, Nick. But you getting back and bulking back up?
That's what I'm trying to do. I go through these phases where I want to cut down, bulk up. I really don't even know what I'm doing. I guess I'm bulking up, but yeah, I'm just trying to work out, and I guess that'll do it.
And the sled's your best friend, at least that's what I saw on Twitter this morning.
That thing is evil. It's just pure evil. Every time I do it, and I do it with an elevation mask, it gets me right after. So I get done with it, and then I try to walk it off, but I end up just walking to the bathroom like, is this going to happen? Am I going to puke? I didn't today, but come next week, leg day, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it looks like you're already getting those memories back, and I'm re-triggering you from your affair earlier today. But getting back to business, today's episode is our first preview of the Chicago Bears offense this summer. And if you missed any of the defensive previews, I do encourage you to go back and give those a lesson, but not yet. We're here and we're ready to share our offensive preview for the Chicago Bears. Of course, their offensive line today. But before we officially dive on in, Nick, we did reach our goal, which I'm very excited for. We have hit 600 reviews on Apple Podcasts, which means it's time to give away a free Chicago Bears jersey. I want to thank everyone who gave our show a review literally since the beginning of our show back in 2015. It means a lot to both Nick and myself to see the support for what we do. But Nick, I think we should just kind of start our show off by announcing the winner, right? How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, so the winner of the free jersey for the 600 mark is going to be Daniel Delahunty. Daniel, I want to say congratulations for winning this jersey. A lot of people in this one, really competitive, of course, but Google gave you the lucky random number this time by, so make sure to give me an email, send it out, will@chicagoaudible.com, or send us a message on Twitter or on Facebook. Let me know which jersey you want, which color you want it in, what size to put it in, and we'll make sure to send it out your way. But congrats, Daniel. Really awesome stuff for you. And if you didn't win this time, you're always in the running for the next jersey giveaway, which will be when we hit 700 reviews on Apple Podcasts. So make sure to enter yourself for the next giveaway by leaving a review if you haven't yet. Again, congratulations, Daniel. But Nick, it's time to get down to business and begin breaking down the Chicago Bears offensive line heading into 2020. I was a little nervous starting these notes and getting into this line, but are you ready?
Yeah, as you should have been, Will, but we're going to break it down here and hopefully make people feel a little bit better. I would hope.
We'll see. We've done this before where we've came in shows not feeling it, and at least not think it's going to turn out to be positive, and we find a way to do it. And I think this one's a good test of our skills. But let's go ahead and organize this episode like we've done in the past, and that's going to be, of course, by tiers. And let's start off with the 4 players that we know for certain are starting. And let's go ahead and begin on the left side and move our way down the line. So to start things off, we have Charles Leno Jr. Last year at this time, we had high hopes for Charles Leno Jr. He was coming off a Pro Bowl season. He was a player that seemed to improve each and every year here in Chicago. And last season, though, was perhaps his first time that we kind of saw some regression and not really any true steps forward. Leno Jr. was plagued by penalties, led the team with 13, also had a harder time being a consistent player in terms of his pass production, giving up a career-high 5 sacks to go with a team-high 40 pressures allowed, which was 15 more than any other Chicago Bear. So, Nick, obviously we need to see a bounce back across the board for Leno Jr., but what areas of his game do you anticipate seeing improvement, and why so?
Well, the thing is with Leno Jr., just watching his tape, where I think he got himself in trouble as a tackle, you don't want to get yourself really separated from the rest of the linemen. I thought a lot of times last year, especially going up against some of the better edge rushers that he would have to face, Leno would go to the edge rusher. So if he's going out on an island against a Joey Bosa, for example, which wasn't a good game at all for any of the Bears offensive linemen, but he went out there, and then you're just giving that edge rusher so many opportunities to hit you with a variety of different moves. So I think with Leno Jr. and now having Juan Castillo, who's we have to mention him a bunch of times throughout this episode because he's fundamental in what these offensive linemen are hopefully going to be able to do this season. Hopefully just cleans up that technique a little bit, because I think that's what it really was with Leno, just kind of putting himself in bad positions to start. And then obviously once the play happens, you go in against some of these very talented edge rushers, you're going to have like the penalties that you mentioned. You're going to have the pressures you're giving up. So I think that's the big thing with Leno. You just want to see him not go out to meet these guys, but try to absorb contact, stay in front of your man. There were just times where Leno Jr. wasn't able to do that. And if you have that happen, no wonder Mitch Trubisky's trying to escape the pocket. And if Nick Foles starts, you're just asking for disastrous things to happen. So I think that's one area of his game where hopefully Juan Castillo can maybe just coach him up a little bit to maybe not have those same mistakes replicate themselves in 2020.
Yeah, penalties is what I have too here, Nick, because I know he's led the team more years than not ever since he became that full-time starter. But just going back to 2018, where this offensive line was really in a groove, he was the least penalized offensive lineman on the entire team, and I would love to get him back to that. I know last year, especially early on, he had issues with his hands, and I know the NFL kind of changed how they're calling those holding penalties, and it took him a while to adjust. But after he found out what they were calling and watching it on film, I know he was able to make that adjustment, get back to business, and not being nearly as highly penalized in the second half of the season. It's all really about, when it comes to Leno Jr., it's just that focus and making sure he's not grabbing all too much. But do you have any expectations for Charles Leno Jr.? Are you going to hold him to that Pro Bowl level that we saw a couple of years ago? That's where we were last year at this time, or are you like me where I'm starting to probably make my expectations for him a little bit more modest?
Yeah, I think that would be the best route, because I think if we hold him to these Pro Bowl expectations, we're almost setting ourselves up to be disappointed. Not to say that Leno Jr. can't replicate those results, but it's just hard to do so. And it's really going to all come down to what Juan Castillo is going to instill in him. And now being not with obviously Harry Heastan this year, seeing the difference that he can bring to Leno's game. Maybe just simplifies things. Maybe that's what it is. But I think that going that Pro Bowl expectation level for Charles Leno Jr., being a former 7th-round draft pick and really exceeding our expectations from the get-go, would be something that's just going to lead to disappointment down the road. So I'm going to temper expectations, just play solid, just don't have those penalties that were plaguing him really early on in the season, and just don't get beat as often. Offensive linemen are going to get beat. It's going to have, there's so many good edge rushers, and these defenses bring all these complex blitzes. It's going to happen at some point. Just don't let it happen as often as it did in 2019. That could go for all the linemen, to be
right? I was
completely
going to
honest.
say copy and paste all the way down this show, Nick, and we probably wrap it up here in about 5 minutes. But of course, we're going to be a little bit more in depth than that. Next question, real quick, on Charles Leno Jr. is, how much of last year's struggles do you think was just him being mentally beat? I think he was a little bit at times, a little bit too caught up in his own head, overthinking. He just didn't seem like as fast and as reactive as we've seen in years past, getting out of his stance, trying to set that edge a little bit and protect it. It seemed like he was just always a step slower in 2019 compared to what we've seen in the past. And when you see that from offensive linemen, at least from my perspective, it's just that he's probably overthinking his duties, his assignment on really any given down. Do you kind of have that same sense where Leno Jr., and this could probably, again, be applied across the board here, but specifically for Leno Jr. being a little bit more in his head than in years past, and he needs to get back to that reactionary, instinctive type of football?
Yeah, that could definitely be the case. And I wonder if the expectations for 2019, maybe putting that on every one of these players itself and then seeing the results not happen, I think players do get in their own head. It definitely happens. But what you mentioned, really players maybe taking a step slow because they're thinking too much, I think that really, really applies to the next guy we're going to talk about at left guard with James Daniels. But it definitely could be a possibility for Charles Leno Jr. as well, because it just looked like at times a lot of these guys were a step slow. I don't know if Harry Heastan, what he was trying to implement here, just wasn't being put into these guys' head the way that he envisioned, and then out on the field, it just never happened. But it just seemed like there were times where a lot of these guys were slow, and we'll definitely talk about the rest of them for sure.
Tristan here, our moderator, longtime moderator, big-time fan of the show. Tristan, great to see you here in the chat. You brought up a good point that we don't really have any other alternatives at left tackle right now on the roster. Does that make Charles Leno Jr., out of every player we're going to discuss here, I'm not going to say he's more important, but we have the most to lose if he does continue to show that regression, just because we may have a swing tackle. We still need to figure that one out, but there's really no true fit at left tackle on this team, and we'll talk about our depth concerns later on. But does that make his Leno Jr. being his ability to rebound and bounce back just that much more important?
I think so. I mean, when you look at it, if Charles Leno Jr. were to go down with an injury or something, I don't really know who steps up to fill that role right here. Just looking at, we obviously have all the players listed and we're going to talk about them, but there's not a clear solution or a guy that's just going to fill in and be serviceable, even at that, just serviceable. So it is very important that Leno just plays, I would even take mediocre. Well, like it doesn't have to be spectacular, good, like just be a decent left tackle. And I think the Bears they'll take that from what happened last year. Obviously we want better for Leno Jr., but it's important that he rebounds because, like you said, he's really the only guy that plays that left tackle position.
Instead of mediocre, can we just say average?
Yeah, I'm good with average. I'll take average.
Okay. Mediocre, I was like, I don't know if I can really stomach that. I think mediocre is a step down from average. So let's set the bar at average for this season. And we'll talk about the future here. Maybe not today, but of course we're always keeping our eye on that one as well. But Nick, you mentioned next guy up here, James Daniels, after putting together a very strong rookie season that had us all excited about his future at being a long-term solution up front for the Bears. Daniels suffered from a dreaded sophomore slump. There was that failed experiment moving him to center, but after swapping him back to guard, his play did lean back toward that level that we saw in 2018. And remember, he's still a very young player. He's at the age of 22, which is younger than a lot of the top offensive linemen that were drafted this year. And a good chunk of his experience has came early since he came here in Chicago, since he's been drafted. He is, 22? He's already appeared in 32 career games with a ton of starts as well. So he's young. He has a lot of experience. So combining that youth and experience, Nick, my expectations and aspirations are going to be high for James Daniels this year. I want to know, what do you see that gives you hope for Daniels taking a step forward into 2020 season, and why should it be different than perhaps, especially early on from a year ago?
Yeah, I think it's a tale of two sides from James Daniels. I think when he was playing center to start off the 2019 season, you saw a lot what you were maybe saying about Charles Leno Jr., where he was just a step slow. The Bears love to utilize that outside-inside zone, and with a lot of things, it's about reaching guys and getting in the right position to block. It just seemed like at times for James Daniels, it was a little hesitant. Where do I have to actually go? What's the best route to take to get to the defensive lineman? How do I get to the second level? And as I was watching some of the tape from the beginning of the season, you saw James Daniels just playing slow. He's an athletic lineman, and when they made the transition, I think it was the first game against Detroit, and put him back to left guard and Cody Whitehair to center, you saw James Daniels, I think, come alive a little bit. You saw him actually get in front of people, reaching guys, getting in position, polling and getting to second level, and I was like, the clear difference where he's just not having to think about what he has to do, where if he has to call out the Mike linebacker or things like that, that puts the Bears offensive line and the offense in the best position when James Daniels is able to use his athleticism and speed and just obviously blocking ability without thinking as much. And I think that's why I'm hopeful for James Daniels. If they actually stay with him at left guard and Cody Whitehair at center, that's going to be the best thing, I think, for this offense and just for the continuity of this group. But that's why I have hope. That left guard position, he just plays faster. And if he's playing faster, he's not making as many mistakes.
Correct. And my question for you on top of this, I'm sorry to be going right back to you here, but you brought up some good points about this being a better fit. And I know you, of course, you've been a fan of James Daniels since his days at Iowa, where you went to school. And are you disappointed that he's ended up a guard here? I know when he got drafted, we assumed guard early, transitioned to center. And then, like you said, it just seemed like it was a little bit too much on his plate. Again, it could change here in a few years, but like you, I agree. He should stay put. I really don't want to keep flip-flopping these two guys. But is that a disappointment to you to have him at a guard and he wasn't able to take that step to center?
I don't think so, really. I mean, when you look at the center guard position, those two, I guess, positions are kind of interchangeable in what you want. Obviously, you want the smarter player, I think, playing the center position just because there's so much responsibility there. And yes, that's what James Daniels played at Iowa, and you just thought it would be a seamless fit. But as he's probably come to know, these defenses are complex. They come from all different directions. But if he can be, and this is a stretch because we still have a lot to see from James Daniels, a Pro Bowl guard, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think Bears fans would be too. I think we were just all anticipating the center being that position just because that's what he played at Iowa. But then there was so much flip-flopping going around. And if Cody Whitehair, and he said with Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer just in an interview not too long ago that he likes playing center, that I'm fine with that. If those two players are fine with their respective positions, center and guard, as they are right now, I'm not too disappointed with it. I think we just all had the anticipation of James Daniels just being that center, having that seamless fit, because he did it at Iowa, which just produces offensive linemen year after year.
Correct. No, I totally get that. Of course, when you're looking at any player's career trajectory, that was that step. I think personally a little disappointed. It's not like it's going to end his career or anything of that nature, of course, but was hoping he can take that step. And another, obviously, I think his job, any job at NFL center is hard. Do you think it was harder due to who was behind center, not being able to read some of those as well, some of those packages, and maybe centers are asked to do a little bit more in the Bears offense compared to maybe some others around the league? I've heard rumblings of that, and that's why they put, of course, Whitehair back, because he's been there, has that experience, and can help Trubisky kind of call out and point out some of these blitzes that perhaps number 10 was unable to recognize himself.
Yeah, I don't know like how that works with the responsibility or how much weight is put on, center and the quarterback, but you also got to take into consideration like Cody Whitehair and Mitch Trubisky. They are a tight combo there. I mean, it was what Cody Whitehair is the grandfather. Mitch Trubisky is the grandfather of Cody Whitehair's daughter. I think
Godfather, right?
Godfather, yeah.
Grandfather.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, dang.
I'm already aging them a little too fast here, but they have a really good connection. So I think that also maybe helps in wanting to keep this position switch permanent. Well, again, we'll see. Maybe come training camp, maybe they're switching again, but that can also play a factor into it. And I think Cody Whitehair, he's just such a professional in what he's able to do and how he's able to diagnose defense. He's had a little bit, obviously, more time than James Daniels to do it, but yeah, it's hard to say how much weight is put on the center or the quarterback in trying to diagnose what's actually going on.
There you go. I served it up and you kind of tiptoed around it, Nick, which is kind of what I was expecting there. But let's go ahead. We've mentioned Cody Whitehair enough. I think it's time to kind of segue on over into him. And if you don't recall, he did sign a 5-year, $51 million extension right before that 2019 season started last September. That way he didn't have to play in the final leg of his rookie contract. He also adjusted this contract just this past offseason to make some more cap space for guys like the free agents that came our way, like Robert Quinn, Nick Foles. Right here, he recently spoke about his motivation, and he's feeling some anger about how that 2019 season unfolded. And I know on the field last year, he was the most consistent player that the Bears had up front, whether he's at guard, whether he transitioned back to center. No matter where he was able to plug and play and just be a consistent guy. Only allowed 19 pressures, which is the least of any of the starters on the team. So, Nick, with Cody Whitehair where he is, he's been around for quite some time. I think we know what to expect out of him. Do you think there's still more potential untapped with Cody Whitehair, that we can see some continued growth this year, especially if they keep him in a consistent spot?
Yeah, I think so. I think just watching Cody Whitehair, you can definitely tell who is the best offensive lineman that the Bears have, and it's easily Cody Whitehair. Like I mentioned earlier, a big thing with what these linemen have to do in Matt Nagy's offense, especially in inside zone, is reaching that next defender, going to second level. Cody Whitehair, regardless of whether he was at guard or center, is phenomenal at doing that and putting himself in a position to just wall off defenders and to give guys like David Montgomery, Tree Cohen an opportunity to get those extra yards. So I think if you leave him there at center, let him actually just stay at that position, he's only going to get better. And obviously, going back and forth, there's different responsibilities that go with it. I think you can expect even better things from Cody Whitehair if that continuity remains. I loved what I saw from him, even though the unit itself was terrible. Will, like, we're not gonna get away from that. It was bad, but Cody Whitehair, he was good. I liked what I saw from him, just reaching the second level and giving his running backs opportunities. Can't say that about the rest of the guys that played on that offensive line, but I think there is definitely room to grow. And if he remains in that same spot, it can definitely happen.
Yeah, obviously we've seen a lot of growth from Whitehair throughout his time. He's someone who we had a lot of snap issues early on in his career. It was a weekly topic on our post-game shows. Those snaps interfering the play timing, leading to potential turnovers. It wasn't pretty, but it's something that we haven't had to talk about in a couple of seasons, which is great, except I just brought it up here. But just trying to show that he has taken some of his weaknesses and he's able to turn them into non-issues. And I believe, like you said, he was really good last year. I mentioned he was the most consistent player we've had for the offensive line. And I believe that, like you, he should be able to take a step forward, just get a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser, a little bit quicker. And I think all of those combined should lead to another really good season for Cody Whitehair, Mr. Consistency for the Chicago Bears up front. Anything else on Whitehair before we move on?
It's good that I think having him in the center of everything helps out whoever's going to play right guard, and obviously James Daniels. I think that is also another reason why, if the Bears are going to make this move permanent, it works out for the betterment of the entire offensive line.
Absolutely. Can't really disagree with you there, Nick. All right, so to wrap up the returning starters, let's take a look at Bobby Massie. Massie will be entering his 5th season in Chicago and the 5th as the team's starting right tackle. Massie missed the final 5 games last season due to a high ankle sprain. He missed another game earlier in the season due to having a vertigo episode. It was unusual for Massie to miss so much time. He's been very consistent with his availability throughout his entire tenure in Chicago without really having to miss any stretches of games, just a few here and there. But Nick, Massie, he's a very interesting topic. He used to be a butt of a lot of our jokes early on in our podcast history, as well as his Chicago Bears career, but he steadily increased at a very strong 2018 season where I believe he was the only tackle in the NFL who had over 600 pass block attempts to not allow a single sack. But then, just like everyone else in this entire offense, he's not alone. We just saw some steps backwards. So someone who did get better for some years, like Charles Leno Jr., taking a step backward, very much an identical situation. So with that, I know Bobby Massie's a different person. So what should we expect out of him in 2020?
Yeah, again, with maybe technique is the biggest thing that I want to see improved with Bobby Massie, especially when he's putting his hands and trying to get his hands on defensive linemen. It just seems like, just watching the tape, there's a lot of times where he just missed with his hand checks, or if he did get them, there's a guy like a Joey Bosa who's just able to smack those hands off of him to get after the quarterback. That seemed like a consistent problem with Bobby Massie, where as big as he is, there needs to be some pop and some pushback when he's able to get his hands on guys, but you first need to connect. And that was just an issue that I saw consistently, regardless of who the edge rusher was or how they were actually bringing the pressure, whether it was on a stunt. His hands were very inconsistent last year. I don't know why that was the reason. We've seen, like you said earlier, when he was with the Bears, where maybe he was more consistent, at least. It could just be a contagious thing where when the whole line's bad, everybody's going to be bad, except for Cody Whitehair for particular parts. But I think that's, again, going back to Juan Castillo. He's probably going to see similar things on tape, and probably a lot more than I can identify just watching it, and trying to refine things. Because Bobby Massie, at this point in his career, you're not really expecting him to become a whole completely different player. Just refine some of the technique things that you messed up and consistently messed up in 2019 and make it better for 2020. It doesn't have to be an all-pro or, a Pro Bowler. Just like the word that we used earlier, not mediocre, but average. We will take that at the tackle positions as of right now, because really it's way better than what we saw in 2019.
I mean, mediocre Massie does have a ring to it, Nick.
It does. It's not the best. It's not a good ring to have, though.
It's not, but I think average or right on that cusp of that average line is what really we should expect from Massie. It's what we've seen out of him. Nick, you hit on it. He really just has a hard time of making sure people don't get around that edge. He's a little slow to get into get into that hitch, to kind of square himself up. Like if he's a run blocker, we've seen some good things. He can drive some guys out of plays. But when there's a true edge rusher and they're not trying to go through him, they're trying to go around him. That's when he needs some additional help, whether it's a chip from a back, a chip from a tight end, or an H-back. That's where he does need that assistance. I don't anticipate that changing. But just like Charles Leno Jr., there's really no one here to step in, challenge him for this job, and take it. So I think Bobby Massie, we're going to have to play with him here for another season. We'll see how this goes here for the future. But in terms of expectations, modest at most is where I'm at. You're calling for the impossible, or not really, but when you mentioned All-Pro or Pro Bowl level of play. So obviously that's not going to be the case, but I'll take an average season. Somewhere in the top 20 realm would put me in a pretty good spot. Top 20 in terms of what? Would you put that right tackles only, Nick, or total tackles? I would say probably right tackles only.
Yeah, because, 20 overall for all tackle. That means Bobby Massie's, better than average, which we're not expecting. So right tackle, yeah, just around that 16 to 20 range, that would be fantastic for Bobby Massie. But I think more the 20 and maybe a little bit lower, to be completely honest, would be right where he's probably going to play in 2020.
All right, well, I'm not going to harp on Massie too much. I'm sure we have plenty of time throughout 2020 to kind of do that in when time allows. But I do have a big picture question before we get into that second tier. We all know these guys will have some continuity, which is going to be key. You've mentioned Juan Castillo, who should be able to help as well. But the Bears are just so bad last year, especially the offensive line and all the categories, whether it's pressures allowed, but more in particular here, just allowing the Bears to do anything on the ground, ranking 27th in the NFL in yards per game. And obviously the offensive line really just did fail in that regard. But what can I do this year to maybe help the backs out just a little bit more as a whole entire unit? Because for me, when I'm looking at them, I just see the need for them to work on getting into those gaps a little bit quicker. We talked about that speed earlier on. The Bears run that zone scheme, and the responsibility for those is a lot of those play side gaps, and too often they're just too slow to kind of hit their marks. They allow those defenders to kind of penetrate the gaps, get some push, which is allowing them, or disallowing them, I should say, to reach that second level consistently. And they're just having a hard time dealing with the defensive line. And in a zone scheme, you really need guys like your Cody Whitehair, your backside guard, to really be able to reach that second level to take care of linebackers, which will open up some of that space, because we'll talk about the running backs here later tonight and for the podcast the next episode. But just too many times David Montgomery is getting contacted in the backfield or right at the line of scrimmage. We just need to see some consistent holes open up, which to me would all begin with just playing a little bit faster and really hitting and getting into those gaps. How about you?
You know what, and you mentioned great points there, Will, and that's something I would definitely mention. Another thing, and what realistically should be in every offensive lineman everywhere, they just got to be more physical. Like, there's a lot of times, and you mentioned it, Will, where there were defenders in the backfield right at the snap. That means there's no resistance. That means guys are, like you just mentioned, a step slow. But there's also a physicality point to this. The Bears' front five needs to actually push people off the ball and not take it. There were so many times where short yardage situations where Matt Nagy almost elected to try to run outside because there just isn't maybe the confidence of this unit to provide a push. So I'm thinking where that's going to come from is inside, deep down within each of these guys, and Juan Castillo's got to bring it out of them. That's simply what it is. So that's what I want to see. Just a little bit more aggression, a little bit more physicality, push people off the ball, give your guys like David Montgomery a chance. Because if he's already having to make two guys miss in the backfield as soon as he gets a snap, you're not going to get most likely positive yards out of that play. Already behind the chains, and we know the Bears offense can barely get first downs or stay on the field when it's an even playing field. Put them back a few yards, you're just setting up for things to not play in your favor. So more physicality is what I would love to see out of the offensive lineman here in Chicago.
We need it. Physicality, playing faster. The entire offense is really going to hinge on the offensive line's ability to rebound from last season. If we see a whole year, just like we did a year ago, we may see minimal improvement at best out of this offense. But if they can take a step up or a couple of steps forward or back to the 2018 level, that's when we should see this offense really come together. It's really going to hinge, like I said, on this offensive line's ability to figure it out and put all the pieces together. But all right, Nick, up next, we do have our second tier. I actually broke it into Tier 2A and Tier 2B. What does that mean? You'll find out soon enough, Nick, and so will our listeners. But first, do you want to let people know how they can support our show?
Yeah, so if you want to get a shout out on the next podcast, you could send a $5 donation through Venmo or PayPal, and we ask that you give us your name and also where you're from. So then when we give out the shout out, you can get that little incentive as well. You can look up our Venmo username is the Chicago Audible. Should see my name, Nicholas Moriano, and the Chicago Audible logo. Then on PayPal, you can make the donation to chicagoaudible.com/PayPal. For everyone that's sent in donations, throughout the couple of months now, I feel like since we started this, we can't thank you enough. It's been awesome to see where everybody's from, our international listeners to, people just around the United States. It's been awesome to get that. Again, it helps us to do what we love doing, and that's just providing you with the best Bears coverage possible. Again, we can't thank you enough, but you could send a $5 donation through Venmo or PayPal. And one last time, the username is the Chicago Audible for Venmo, and then PayPal, chicagoaudible.com/PayPal.
Yes, no shout-outs this week, unfortunately, which will be for the offensive line and the running back show, but the show does go on, and like you said, Nick, thank you to everyone who's done it in the past. Of course, we're going to hit a dry spell eventually. We all know that's going to happen, but if you're listening and you haven't helped out yet and supported the show, it'd be a great time to definitely do so as we kind of embark here on our 2020 journey. But Nick, getting back to this Bears offensive line, entering that second tier, which I'm going to call 2A, which is three guys where I'm going to lump into the right guard battle. We have Germain Ifedi. It was a free agent signing this year. We've talked about him on a handful of episodes already, but in short, he's a player who has a ton of starting experience in Seattle after being drafted in the first round. Raw talent with a ton of physicality and, of course, just athleticism as well. But we saw him put together in Seattle just in spurts, and the hope is Juan Castillo can really tap into Ifedi's potential at right guard, which is arguably his best fit up front as opposed to tackle, where he spent the majority of his career to date. And then, of course, you have Rashaad Coward, which, by the way, Nick, I'm proud that Rashaad Coward is up here in Tier 2. Too many years in the past, he was one of the last people that we would mention in the Countdown to Camp episode, just due to the position switch, not knowing where he's going to fit, if he's even going to make the team. Not saying he's a lock this year, but to have him up here, someone who was able to make that successful switch from nose tackle to right tackle to actually ending up having to play right guard last year because Kyle Long went down, which is yet another new position for him, where he definitely struggled, but still, it was expected. I mean, they moved him around so much, and he's still very raw, but he's someone in the mix. And then I'm going to throw in Alex Bars, the highly touted, undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame a year ago. He was looking to be a high-round pick before that really bad knee injury changed that story. Last year, he made the team as part of the practice squad, got elevated throughout the season, but only 11 snaps last year, but still a fan favorite. Now, Nick, out of this group, I have a hard time believing that anyone other than Germain Ifedi is going to end up as the team starting right guard. I think that's pretty clear. They haven't said so yet, but I believe it's going to kind of take care of itself. Is this the same for you, or is this competition a little bit more open in your eyes?
No, I think when it comes down to it, once training camp starts and once the first unit actually goes out there, even though Germain Ifedi hasn't been here too long, he's most likely going to be the guy that's with the starting four that we just talked about. I think it's the experience that he has playing, a couple positions, but in college he was primarily playing guard and they moved him out to tackle because of a need basis. Same kind of thing happened in Seattle. So I think when it comes down to it, you're going to see Germain Ifedi in his most comfortable position. That's what he said during his little video conference, that he does feel like he's comfortable playing inside, but he'll do whatever, of course, the team asks of him. And one of the reasons why I feel like he's going to be the guy, starting right guard, is the faith that he has in Juan Castillo, and that being reciprocated right back to Germain Ifedi. He said, just looking at Juan Castillo, he has a history of making guys better, whether he was at Baltimore or at Buffalo. Germain Ifedi said during that video conference that he watched the tape of those offensive linemen, and they got
Cool.
Germain Ifedi having success in Chicago is that he will get better as well.
Great. I think you're back. You did cut out for a second. I think my internet had a Xfinity is having some gremlins attack it, but you're back now, so that's great. And it was only like a split second. I'm sure the stream picked it up, but that's always fun. So I don't know if they saw my surprise face or you kept going or the whole screen went black, but I believe I caught most of that, Nick. I'll make sure to catch some of that up in post-production. Great. Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know what you heard or not, but I just basically said that Germain Ifedi will be the starting guard.
It took you that many words to say that?
I was given a lot of insight there. Well, man, you should have heard it. I feel bad that the internet cut out as soon as I was giving this nice insight.
No, you're good. It was I've heard 95% of it, which I think is more than enough. But let's move down to Tier B, Tier 2B, otherwise known as the two rookie tackles, aka Ham and Pig. Arlington Hambright, rookie tackle / guard out of Colorado. Lachavious Simmons, the rookie tackle out of Tennessee State. We've talked about both of them in the show, both our instant reactions as well as the episode where we learn more about each of the draft picks, but I think they deserve their own spot here in this episode as well. I believe both have an understanding that these players are more projects than anything, at least at this point in their careers. Not really expecting to see them much at all this year. Is that accurate, Nick?
Yeah, I would think so. When I was thinking about Arlington Hambright and Lachavious Simmons obviously being 7th-round draft picks, you don't want to see these guys on the field really in 2020 just because of, again, given where they're being drafted at, but there's still a lot left to see from these guys. I was able to talk to both their college coaches, and of course you're going to say all the best things about Hambright and Simmons, but for the best case scenario for this Bears offensive line, they just need to develop and just kind of learn this offense, learn how to, I think they both have experience running inside and outside zone. They both did it at their respective colleges, but it's still a much bigger step than at Colorado or Tennessee State than to be asked to play significant snaps in the NFL for a unit that has already struggled. So it's putting a lot of pressure on these guys if you want to ask for significant minutes or anything like that. But yeah, this is just going to be a year, I think, of development and just learning the offense. And then maybe next year, we could talk about where we kind of see these two guys. But that's kind of where I have them pegged right now.
Yeah, it's hard to really have any higher aspirations. It's tough. You're not always going to find a Charles Leno Jr. type in the 7th round. For every Charles Leno Jr., you probably have a few, Teo Fabalujes. So you just never know what you're going to find down there, but a lot to learn from them. And honestly, I'm excited. It's tough. As we talked about preseason being cut to 2 games, you may not get as many extended looks for some of these guys. But I am excited for their time in these games. We won't be able to watch training camp practices, so whatever glimpses we can get out of them, I know I'm personally looking forward to. All right, offensive lineman, where we have a handful of players. We have Jason Spriggs, tackle from my alma mater. Only for him, he did have to play up north in Green for a few seasons. He's dealt with some injuries over the last 2 years, including missing all of last year to earn a job as the Bears swing tackle. You have Sam Mustipher, last year's undrafted free agent center out of Notre Dame. He's back for another go.